This panel is dealing with the issue of racial justice. I want to give it a little context, especially if we're activists or feel that we're politically involved. It's very easy to get caught up in our world and miss what is actually going on with the average person who probably doesn't even know who their congressperson is for a variety of reasons. The issue of race and justice in terms of those who violate people's constitutional and civil and human rights being held accountable is a topic that is taking place all over the country with a lot of people who I don't often see in places like this. I'm just getting back from Ferguson. I did a lot of coverage of it last year, but I very deliberately didn't go to Ferguson because there was a lot of Fergusons going on all around here in California. There was 60 days of protest in Santa Rosa that didn't make the national news. It was known here, but it didn't make the national news, but it was just as important, just as compelling, and the people were just as serious as the people on the ground in Ferguson, Missouri. So I felt it was important to stay there and talk to people, via phone. But folks there said, you really need to go. And I've been all over the world. I've been in London when they had the bombings. I've been to the G8 summits and different countries. I've been all over and seen stuff. But they said, you need to go to Ferguson because this is a whole different thing. And I was a little skeptical until I touched down. And I've never seen anything that brutal. I've never seen anything that vicious. I've never seen anything where people just don't give a damn. And to see people stand up to that is inspiring, but what's upsetting is to see that what is taking place there in plain view on our watch, because Missouri's not a Tea Party town. Ain't no Tea Party people walking around pulling the strings. It's not the place where you're going to find the Sean Hannitys and the Bill O'Reillys or any of those folks. These people have D's next to their names, where states of emergency are being pulled out on folks for demonstrating. I watched while journalists that are well known were sent away to jail for covering actions, for covering demonstrations. And when they went for 20 hours with hands behind their back, and they were standing far away from the demonstrations with cops that were cursing at them, using racial epithets, and pretty much saying, I will do what the hell I want and keep it moving. I saw folks show up in militia outfits, calling themselves oath keepers, carrying assault weapons, showing up after midnight. They said they were there to protect the businesses, but if you were there to protect the businesses, you're not showing up after midnight, who were sitting there just talking with the cops. While other folks who were walking across the street when the cops said it wasn't okay were getting hauled off to jail. I saw a 12-year-old get arrested with her father. This is going on not in 1955, not in 1963, not in 1970. This is happening in 2015 on 10/10, 8/10/2015, right here in the good old USA. So we have to talk about this racial justice, and I can give a whole long list. I was in New York where there were 700 lawyers who came together to talk about strategies on how to deal with racial injustice as it pertains to the police. That was a Black Law for Lives. Why do we even have to have that sort of gathering in 2015? I was in Cleveland where there were 3,000 people from all over the country, many of them millennials, talking about this incident. And while they were there in Cleveland, there were another 25,000 down the block also dealing with racial injustice. So this might not show up on the evening news because a lot of this stuff wasn't covered, but it doesn't mean that it's not existing. And some of these folks, the perception is that they're not active. They're not voting. But I know for a fact that many of the people in Ferguson have gone to the UN, not once, but twice in Geneva. I know that many of them have gone down to Brazil, they've been to Palestine, they've been all around the world where they're comparing notes and coming back and saying, wow, you know, this place where we live is just as bad as that place where you're at. So they're all making this global connection and coming to the understanding that many of the people that are repressing them in forms of police are getting training in all these places as well. So there's a global understanding of what's happening, and people are trying their best to deal with it. There's a movie that's out now called Straight Outta Compton. And it's selling out, and people are there. All over are watching this. It's one of the best movies for a generation that they've seen in a long time. If racial justice is not on the board now, after you see that movie, it most certainly will. Go see that movie, and you will see people stand up in the middle of that movie and sing along F the police in unison, and it's not just black folks. There's a whole lot of folks in that thing. If there's anything they captured on that film was the brutality of LAPD. And now LAPD has just issued a statement saying that they feel this movie is going to do harm, and they're making this whole case about people shouldn't see it. They just put this out today. So why are we here? We're on the front line as people who are politically involved, have political know-how, are going to be charged with getting people to go to the polls. And, you know, in 2015 and 2016, we're going to be the folks that are going to be trying to engage folks. And so we need to have a clear understanding of what this racial justice situation means for a lot of the people who may not be able to vote. And as I close out and then introduce our panel, one of the things I found about Ferguson, which was real interesting, because folks stood up on TV and they wagged their fingers and said, you should vote. Why aren't you voting? And when you're down there and you see that you can get a ticket in 5 different cities within an hour for the same offense with police who are definitely going to make no bones about it. I had it happen, like, I'm going to follow you and find something to give you a ticket. And when you leave this city, you're going to get a ticket in the next one, and in the next one, and the next one. And those tickets will quickly come into warrants, because even if you can pay the ticket or get rid of it, you still got to pay the court costs, right? So you have 21,000 people in Ferguson and 24,000 warrants. That's not acceptable, and that's just one city. So how does it tie into voting? Well, when you show up to the polls and you got a warrant, there are police sitting there, as they were in the last election, going, oh, your name is James Smith? We have a warrant for your arrest. Go ahead and get your vote on, and then we're going to take you to jail for the week. That's happening now. So we need to really understand some of the challenges that are facing the voiceless, the ones that don't show up on the evening news, that aren't pundits on CNN, that aren't going to be in this room right now, but nevertheless, they make a difference in the political landscape of this country. So with that being said, I want to introduce some of our folks here that I think can lend some insight into what we're talking about. We have Stefan Zuns. He is a professor of politics and international studies at the University of San Francisco, where he serves as coordinator of the program in Middle Eastern Studies. He's recognized as one of the country's leading scholars of U.S. Middle East policy and strategic nonviolent action. He also serves as a senior policy analyst for the Foreign Policy in Focus project of the Institute for Policy Studies. And I can go on. He can hold the court. He can hold court by himself. So he's also the author of a couple of books, Western Sierra and Tinderbox. Joining us via Skype is Dr. Gerald Horne, who holds the John J. and Rebecca Morris Chair of History and African American Studies. What I really like about Gerald is his book, Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origin of the United States. He also has Race to Revolution, the U.S. and Cuba during slavery and Jim Crow, and he clearly understands racial justice, and he can give that historical understanding to it. Also on Skype, we have Bill Fletcher, who is no stranger to these type of issues. He's an activist since his teen years. He's traveled all over the world. He is a senior staff person for the AFL-CIO. He is the former president of Trans-Africa Forum, a senior scholar with the Institute of Policy Studies. He's also on the editorial board of Black Commentator, And last time I talked to Bill, he was just getting back from Palestine. We brought a delegation, including some of the folks that I run into in Ferguson. So he has a lot to say. We also have a gentleman here from the ACLU, Chauncee Smith, who's a racial justice advocate, and the ACLU is doing a lot of things that don't often make the news. They have an app, they're trying to get some bills passed, and they've been fighting this good fight. Oftentimes, it's not held up to the forefront, but we can get an understanding of what they're dealing with. And lastly, we have Aaron Harvey. He says he's a community organizer, but I think Aaron's story kind of personifies what so many people are dealing with. This man went to jail over rap lyrics. Yes, people looking at the rap and saying, well, you said this, that, and the third. We're going to find some crazy law and make a connection and say, you must be a member of a gang, and send him to jail. This is happening not just to Aaron. This is happening, these type of small little minute things being turned into felonies and being turned into people having to get lawyers, lose their jobs, have their world turned upside down. This is happening far too often, and he's here to speak about his situation. So let's give it up for our panel, and then we'll jump right into this.